Water blasted her face without warning, full force, relentless, humiliating. In a quiet, wealthy neighborhood, a police officer stood over a black woman on her own lawn, laughing as she struggled to breathe. Neighbors froze. Phones came out, no crime, no threat, just cruelty powered by a badge and a dangerous assumption. As the water finally stopped, she rose, soaked, shaken, and silent, and reached into her pocket. What she revealed next flipped the power in an instant and changed everything. What could make a confident officer suddenly beg for mercy? Comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Subscribe for more powerful stories that demand to be heard. Wednesday mornings were always calm for Dr. Nova Loran. Before courtrooms, rulings, and the constant weight of responsibility, she cherished the quiet ritual of tending her front garden. The neighborhood was known for its manicured lawns and old trees, the kind of place where mornings felt suspended in time. For Nova, it was more than a house. It was proof of a life built through discipline, education, and years of being underestimated. She moved slowly along the front lawn, watering rose bushes she had planted herself. Neighbors passed by, some waving, others barely noticing. Among them was Eleanor Henderson, who had lived on the street for decades and considered Nova a familiar, steady presence. To Eleanor, Nova belonged there as much as anyone else. To Nova, that sense of belonging had been hard-earned. Across the street, a patrol car rolled to a stop. Inside sat Officer Derek Whitmore, a veteran cop who prided himself on instinct more than restraint. From his seat, he watched the scene unfold. The house, the garden, the black woman standing confidently in front of it all. Something about it irritated him. His partner, Officer Ryan Mills, barely looked up, unaware that an ordinary morning was about to fracture. Nova noticed the patrol car too late. The calm she had felt moments earlier thinned into alertness, the kind learned over a lifetime of navigating spaces where she was never assumed to belong. She reminded herself she was on her own property, doing nothing wrong. Still, tension crept in quietly, uninvited. Nearby, a teenager named Marcus Henderson slowed his bike, sensing something off. He had grown up watching moments like these turn ugly without warning. He lingered, phone in hand, unsure if he would need it, but ready. As Whitmore stepped out of the patrol car, authority radiated from him, unchecked and confident. Mills remained behind, conflicted but silent. Down the street, unseen but soon to matter, Chief Amanda Winters and Special Agent Sarah Kim were starting what would be an ordinary day of work. Unaware, they would soon be pulled into a moment that would expose far more than a single act of cruelty. What none of them knew yet was that this quiet morning was about to reveal how quickly power could be abused, and how devastatingly wrong assumptions could become. The moment Officer Derek Whitmore stepped onto the lawn, the air changed. What had been a quiet morning hardened into something sharp and unpredictable. His presence wasn't curious, it was accusatory. His eyes scanned the house, the garden, and finally settled on Dr. Nova Loran, lingering as if the scene itself offended him. Authority rolled off him effortlessly, the kind that had never been meaningfully challenged. Nova felt it immediately, the familiar tightening in her chest. She had lived this moment before in different forms, in offices, hallways, and spaces where her presence demanded explanation. Still, this was her home, her ground. She stood steady, reminding herself of that fact as Whitmore's posture grew more invasive, his proximity deliberate. Each step closer was a test of dominance, a silent demand for submission. From the patrol car, Officer Ryan Mills watched without intervening. His hands hovered near the steering wheel, eyes darting between Whitmore and Nova. He sensed the imbalance, the danger of where this was heading, yet years of hierarchy and fear kept him rooted in place. Silence became his contribution. Whitmore's voice cut through the morning, sharp and dismissive, questioning Nova's presence without ever acknowledging her answers. Every explanation she offered was treated like defiance. Each calm response seemed to irritate him further. The assumption was already made, nothing she said could undo it. Power wasn't interested in facts. Across the street, Eleanor Henderson noticed the shift too. She stepped closer to the edge of her property, watching the interaction unravel with growing concern. She recognized the tone, the disrespect, the way Whitmore spoke as if Nova needed permission to exist there. Eleanor tried to interject, to ground the moment in reality, but her words were brushed aside as interference. Down the block, Marcus Henderson felt his instincts flare. He had seen videos like this online, ordinary encounters spiraling out of control. His phone was already in his hand before he consciously decided to record. Something told him this moment mattered. Something told him it wouldn't end quietly. Whitmore's frustration escalated when he realized the attention building around him. Neighbors slowed, cameras appeared. What should have restrained him only fueled his aggression. His authority was being observed, and that made him reckless. He gestured sharply, issuing orders that carried no legal grounding, mistaking intimidation for control. Nova tried to de-escalate, keeping her movements slow, her voice measured. She knew how quickly perception could be weaponized against her. Every breath felt calculated. Every pause felt dangerous. When she reached for her pocket, she announced it clearly, hoping to cut through Whitmore's hostility before it turned physical. That was when chaos broke loose. A sudden movement, a stumble. Water sprayed unexpectedly from the hose lying in the grass. It barely touched Whitmore, but it was enough. His expression transformed instantly, rage replacing reason. The moment snapped, control vanished. He seized the hose. The water exploded forward without mercy. Full force, no warning. It slammed into Nova's body, knocking the air from her lungs. She staggered, hands raised instinctively, but the pressure didn't stop. It followed her as she fell, soaking her clothes, blinding her, stealing her breath. The laughter in Whitmore's voice cut deeper than the water itself. The crowd erupted. Eleanor screamed. Marcus didn't stop recording. Mills froze, horror written across his face, torn between duty and fear. No one could believe what they were witnessing, and yet it was happening in plain sight. Nova collapsed onto the grass, pinned by the relentless blast. Seconds stretched unbearably long. The water didn't just humiliate, it punished. It sent a clear message about power, about who was allowed dignity and who wasn't. And just when it seemed like it would never end, the water stopped. Soaked, shaken, and gasping, Nova pushed herself up from the ground. Silence fell over the street. Whitmore stood there, breathing hard, convinced he had won. But as Nova steadied herself, she reached into her pocket. And in that moment, everything began to change. Water dripped from Dr. Nova Loron's hair and clothing as she stood upright, the street locked in stunned silence. The humiliation still clung to her, heavy and undeniable, but something else rose with it, clarity. Her breathing steadied. Her hands stopped shaking. In that pause, the balance of power began to shift. Across from her, Officer Derek Whitmore looked satisfied, convinced the moment had ended on his terms. Years of unchecked authority had taught him that fear was compliance and force was resolution. He hadn't noticed the cameras tightening their focus, the neighbors holding their breath, or the way Marcus Henderson's phone captured every second without blinking. Nova reached slowly into her pocket, not in panic, not in defiance, with intention. Whitmore tensed, instinctively bracing for another confrontation. His posture stiffened, his confidence suddenly brittle. Officer Ryan Mills, watching from a few steps back, felt his stomach drop. Something was different now. This wasn't escalation, it was revelation. Nova pulled out a small case, soaked but intact. She opened it deliberately, holding it steady despite the water still dripping from her hands. The gold seal caught the sunlight, unmistakable. The street seemed to inhale all at once. In that instant, Whitmore's expression collapsed. The man who had laughed moments earlier now stared in disbelief. His authority evaporated as reality crashed in. This wasn't just a homeowner. This wasn't a misunderstanding he could spin. This was consequence standing in front of him, undeniable and documented from every angle. Mills stepped forward instinctively, his face pale as recognition set in. He checked his phone, confirming what his gut already knew. The truth spread faster than any order Whitmore could give. Power had shifted, and Whitmore felt it slipping through his fingers. From the sidelines, Eleanor Henderson felt a mix of vindication and grief. Vindication that the truth was finally visible. Grief that it had taken such brutality for it to be believed. She watched as Whitmore's shoulders sagged under the weight of his own actions. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension. Backup was coming, but not in the way Whitmore had expected. This time, the uniform no longer protected him. It exposed him. Nova stood tall despite the cold, despite the stares, despite the trauma still echoing through her body. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any words. Cameras captured Whitmore's unraveling, his authority dissolving into desperation. As Chief Amanda Winters was notified and rushed toward the scene, the gravity of what had happened settled over everyone present. This was no longer a neighborhood incident. It was no longer a private abuse of power. It was a public reckoning. Then came the arrival that sealed it. A black vehicle pulled up, deliberate and unmistakable. Special Agent Sarah Kim stepped out, eyes scanning the scene with trained precision. Her presence marked the moment when the situation crossed an irreversible line, from misconduct to federal consequence. Whitmore knew it too. As Agent Kim approached and the cameras kept rolling, Whitmore's gaze dropped. The man who had wielded power moments earlier now stood exposed, cornered by truth, witnesses, and the law itself. Nova met his eyes one last time, not with anger, not with triumph, but with resolve. And as the crowd watched, one thing became clear. This was no longer about survival. This was about accountability, and what would happen next would echo far beyond that quiet street. The street never fully returned to silence that morning, but the chaos slowly gave way to order. Officer Derek Whitmore was separated from the scene he had dominated only minutes earlier, no longer in control, no longer protected by intimidation. The presence of Chief Amanda Winters shifted the tone immediately. What had begun as unchecked aggression now faced formal scrutiny, documented and undeniable. Cameras remained raised, not out of spectacle, but out of necessity. Dr. Nova Loran stood wrapped in borrowed warmth, her body still cold, her clothes soaked, but her posture unbroken. The shock lingered, yet so did something else, certainty. What had happened to her could not be erased, but it would not be buried either. For once, the truth had witnesses who refused to look away. Nearby, Officer Ryan Mills watched the aftermath with quiet regret. His silence had protected no one, least of all himself. The weight of inaction settled heavily as he realized how close he had come to becoming complicit in something unforgivable. Across the street, Eleanor Henderson wiped away tears, knowing she had seen something that would stay with her forever. Not just violence, but the cost of speaking up too late. Marcus Henderson lowered his phone only when it was clear the moment had passed. The footage he captured spread quickly, not because it was sensational, but because it was real. It showed what too many people experience without cameras, without witnesses, without justice. His choice to record turned a private act of cruelty into a public reckoning. With Special Agent Sarah Kim overseeing the next steps, the incident moved beyond that single neighborhood. It became part of a larger conversation, one about power, accountability, and how easily bias can become violence when left unchecked. This was no longer just about one officer or one woman. It was about a system that too often assumes silence will protect it. Nova returned home later that day changed, not weakened, but sharpened by truth. She understood what her survival represented, not privilege but responsibility. If this could happen to her, it could happen to anyone, and often it does. This story ends where many begin, with a choice: to record or look away, to speak or stay silent, to believe victims or question their worth. The question isn't whether injustice still exists. The question is, what will you do when it happens in front of you? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and our community's fight to be seen. And don't forget to hit the like button. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.